My name is Bo Miguez, Bossier City, Louisiana. I remember 9/11 like it was yesterday. I was actually in Sarasota, Florida. I was headed to meet my grandfather. We were headed to go offshore fishing. On my way to the marina, I looked over and saw Air Force One on the tarmac there in Sarasota, and I just remembered thinking to myself, man, what a wonderful sight. I don't know if anyone has ever seen Air Force One, but it's a just glorious sight, beautiful aircraft, just enormous, and just had feelings overwhelmed. What a great country we live in. And then shortly thereafter, we saw Air Force One departing, fly overhead. And then some fighter planes obviously escorting it out of there.
My name is Colonel Heather Lobew. I am currently the Deputy Staff Judge Advocate out at Air Force Global Strike Command. On 9/11, I was a captain in the Air Force, and I was actually an Air Force intern. It's one of 50 captains that are chosen to do an internship where we work in different offices to give us exposure across the joint services. At the time, I was assigned to Department of Defense in the Legislative Affairs Office. And as one of them was walking by me, he just leaned over and he said, "Hey, turn on your TV. You need to go turn on the TV." So after they left, I did. I went back to the office and I went and turned on the TV and noticed, of course, as everybody did, I guess, is the reporting of the tower had been hit. So we're watching TV, trying to get back to work and doing whatever we were doing, on the computer, and that's when we saw the second plane hit, and it was at that moment we knew our world had changed. We knew this was big. This was big. This wasn't an accident. The world was as we knew it was going to change. But right then, you try to get back to work. You try to keep your mind off of it and just not think too far ahead, or you'll make yourself crazy. And so I started making phone calls and getting back to work. And one of the things that I did in Leg Affairs was to reach out to constituents that had asked their congressman questions that we were going to answer. And then as I was talking to them, you felt the building shake and you could just hear the explosion in the Pentagon when the plane hit, and I just hung up the phone. I hung up the phone and I'm like, what's going on? So I went out of our office, and we were on the D ring. So I went into one of the corridors and I was walking towards the center of the Pentagon, trying to figure out what's going on. As I'm walking that way, people are coming the other way, saying that we have to evacuate. We're being told to evacuate. And it wasn't like a mob scene with everybody walking out. It was definitely people walking fast, not really running, no screaming, nothing along those lines. But you could see everybody's eyes were just really wide, and just everybody is just in their own zone, I guess, just walking, very purposeful, very very purposeful walking out. And we did. You funneled to get out, and it took a while because there were so many people, but we did get out, and the doors that were closest to where we were actually faced to the river. And so the part that the plane hit was the exact opposite side of the Pentagon from where we were. But yet it shook. You could hear it. The whole building shook. But had the plane, actually, if you look at the picture of the Pentagon, had the plane come through there, it would have hit exactly where we were. And there would have been an awful lot of more people in the trajectory if that had happened.
My name's Jim Friday. I was born and raised in Bossier City, Louisiana, and graduated in '89 from Bossier High School. Shortly after, I joined the Marine Corps and got out of the Marine Corps as a sergeant in January of 2000. My family and I moved to New York, where I worked for Nextel. And here's my story on the day of September 11th, 2001. I was driving into work, and changing the stations, going back and forth, and every station seemed to be talking the same thing. So the one station I stopped on, I listened to, and it was Howard Stern. And he just said a plane crashed into the Trade Center. I thought it was a hoax. I called my wife, who was getting ready to go to work. She picked up the phone and I asked her to turn the TV on. She said, "Why?" I said, "Just please do it. I'm not sure yet." As she turned the TV on, her mother and her saw on the news that a plane did crash. As her mother dropped to her knees and let out this scream that I heard through the phone, I knew this was real. My father-in-law worked in the World Trade Centers. He was already at his job that day. I knew it would be my mission to get down there to try to find him in this chaos. I called into work and accounted for all of my men. They were all safe and accounted for. I told my boss I was on my way down, passing the office, and heading straight to the city. As my family frantically tried calling my father-in-law, all circuits were busy. Everything was chaos. I'm 30 miles away from the city in White Plains, and you can see the smoke now covering the sky, just as it did in the Philippines when the volcano erupted. That's the barrel of smoke that you could imagine to see. As I stopped in the depot, I grabbed a generator, knowing that we would need power. I rallied some guys, we headed down, and my main goal was to try to find my father-in-law. As I'm driving and still trying to call my father-in-law throughout the city to figure out where he's at and what's going on, we received a text message from a random stranger who said, "Hey, I have your father. We're walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, and we are safe."
Back in 2001, I was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. I was actually flying B-1s at the time. It was a B-1 squadron, the 9th Bomb Squadron. I was the operations officer for the 9th Bomb Squadron, which is essentially the second in command. We had been working in the later part of the summer. We were going to be doing a deployment to Guam. It was under an exercise called Cornet Sabre. Now at the time, my father was a retired 06 Air Force pilot, worked in the intel and acquisition field for the government at the time, was working in the Pentagon. So on 10 September, after we had finished all our mission planning, I sent him a synopsis of the briefing, or of the mission itself, and a briefing to his Pentagon computer, his office out there. So we launched from Dyess Air Force Base, 3 ship of B-1s, uneventful takeoff and departure around 6:45 Central Standard Time, about 7:45 Eastern Standard Time. It's about the time the terrorists are showing at Logan Airport. So at about an hour and a half into it is when the first aircraft is hijacked. And then at about 8:46 Eastern Time, about 7:45, the North Tower gets hit by Flight 11. And at that time we had no idea. And then we heard air traffic controller landing or directing aircraft land around the site of the accident. So to us it sounds like we've had a major aircraft accident. Then about 2 minutes later, air traffic controller we hear coming across, and they start directing all civilian aircraft to land. It's about 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and I asked the command post at Dyess, so it's about 9 o'clock their time, what do they want us to do? And they tell us to stand by. So we start talking to the air traffic control to find out what's happened. At this point they tell us that both towers in New York City had been struck, and that one of them was down, and that the Pentagon had just been hit as well. Now if you remember, I had said the day before I had asked my dad to go into the office early to check and take a look at the briefing before he started work. So my heart sank when I heard that the Pentagon had been struck, not knowing if I had just asked my dad to go into the building, and now did I just kill my dad by asking him to go in. Dyess Air Force Base command post contacts us and directs us and says, Dark 02 flight, You are directed to proceed to destination and await further instruction. And as I'm starting to evaluate the rest of our plan and what we're going to do and maintain as much fuel as we had, because now the mission is changing and it's going to be going on the fly, I then start to realize that our first set of tankers that were taking off from Alaska had not launched yet by when I was looking at the data card. So I call back to the command post using the HF radio, and I ask 7th Bomb Wing Command Post, have our tankers launched? Information came back they had not. I then asked, are they going to be allowed to launch? Comes back and we hear, Dark 02, you're directed to return to base as fast as possible. We contact air traffic controller because we're flying to a certain destination point before we start our turn towards the south and Abilene, Texas. And so we ask him for a route of traffic change, route of flight change. And air traffic controller comes up very quietly, and you can tell there was a little bit of sadness in his voice. And they say, Dark 02, you are cleared your own navigation wherever you want to go. And as we're coming back, you start to notice there are no aircraft airborne, because even while you're flying and the airspace seems clear, you do see out of the corners of your eye and your peripheral vision, you can see other aircraft and contrails, and you hear the radio traffic combined with that. That all started to go away, and it was a very eerie, lonely feeling being airborne. We're one of the last aircraft actually airborne at the time. We finally land at Dyess Air Force Base around 1:15 in the afternoon Central Time, so it's about 2:15 East Coast time. The President's already spoken, I believe, once at this point. And we land outside the squadron. The base has gone to a high alert status. Get into the squadron. Of course, everybody's in the squadron at this point. They'd been recalled. And so this is the first time that I actually see what has happened on the squadron televisions in the flight order room. And I see the towers being hit. At this point, I still don't know if my father is okay. Communications, I call my wife. I tell her we're back. She's crying. I have asked if she heard from my parents, and she said she can't get through. We then immediately know we are getting ready to go to war as a nation, and we start planning our combat deployment operations. It's not till later that evening, around 5:30 Central Time, 6:30 East Coast time, that I'm finally able to contact my father and verify he's okay. And strangely that day, he was not normally his on-time early self, had some things to do and was going in later, had not made it into the Pentagon at the time. So he was alive, and we were relieved with that.
I'm Lisa Johnson, President of the Bossier Chamber of Commerce, and on the morning of September 11th, I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, preparing to go to a Louisiana Travel Promotion Association board meeting. I was getting ready that morning and had the TV on, as I always do, watching Good Morning America. And then the news break that the Twin Towers had been hit. And then, of course, you know, you just kind of take that double take of, what did I hear? World Trade Center, New York? Oh, no. My brother's up there. This is not happening. So I immediately, just shaking and all, start trying to contact him, because I knew his father-in-law, my sister-in-law's dad, worked in the World Trade Center. And it was like, where are they? Where is he at? Phone lines are busy, they're down, I can't get in touch with anyone. I think I did finally get through the telephone to my brother, and he was frantic trying to find his father-in-law, who we call Poppy, and didn't know anything, but the rest of the family was fine. And it was, you know, I just had to have faith in God that they would be able to find him and that he would be okay, and all you could do was just sit and pray. We did find Poppy. We did. His office had asked him to go and update his ID badge, and he was asked to, so he left the Twin Towers, which was a God thing. And so he had left the World Trade Center to go and update his ID badge, and so he was not in the towers.
I'm David Abernathy, the North Louisiana Disaster Relief Coordinator for Louisiana Baptist Convention Disaster Relief. I had the unique opportunity to respond to 9/11. If you had told me as a kid growing up that I would have ever been given the opportunity to lead a team to New York City, I would have thought there's no way. I probably will never even get a chance to visit New York. But the call came for us to go as a team in November of that year after the attack on New York City. I'll never forget driving into New York, and the next morning when we got up to lead our team down into the Ground Zero area. As a team, we would spend the next week many times in hazard suits with respirators on as we went in to help people get stuff out of their apartments. Some of the buildings had been condemned, others were not going to be habitable anymore. And we would go in and try to pack up stuff. And it was an unusual week, to say the least, because we got to interact with so many of the local New York people on a one-on-one basis as they tried to get questions answered and just tried to figure out what to do with life and their belongings. When we got ready to come back at the end of the week, I'll never forget, as we drove out of New York, we had actually driven that trip, one of the guys in the van said, you know, I might be leaving New York City, but my heart's still there. And that's the way I felt when we got back. I remember telling my wife, I said, I might be back in Louisiana, but my heart's still with the people in New York City. And I shared with her then, I said, I hope I get the chance to go back. Little did we realize that they would ask us to take another team back, and we flew into New York City this time on Christmas Day to begin working over the next week. And on this activation, we weren't helping people with their apartments. We were actually working inside of the zone as we prepared food, working with the Salvation Army that was over the kitchen, and we were feeding those who were working inside of Ground Zero. We fed recovery workers, firemen, police, whoever was involved in the operation. We operated that 24 hours a day. We worked in 8-hour shifts. Sometimes we'd work 8, rest 8, work 8 again. And throughout that week, we had a unique opportunity to meet and just get to know on a personal basis a lot of the individuals that were working. Because it was a holiday week, a lot of the people that were in the area working were some of the first responders that had gone in after the initial attack, and so many of them had personal stories. A lot of times our group would be able to load first aid supplies and coffee and stuff, and we would actually drive on gators down into the recovery effort where the recovery was taking place as we got to deliver needed items to them. I'll never forget one afternoon I saw my wife, and she seemed pretty emotional, and I'd asked her what had happened, and she said, well, I just met 2 high-ranking fire officials, and as I sat down and visited with them at the table, I asked them if they had signed my hard hat, just as a memory of so we won't forget. And they asked, what are you going to do with a hard hat? And she said, we'll keep it always, and it'll be handed down in our family. It's going to be for our family and for our kids. And they said, you know, we'll sign it, but when you get home, hug your kids, because both of us had sons that were firefighters, and they both gave their life out here. And so it was that kind of emotional, just tugging on your heartstrings as you ministered to people and as you met people.
What I also noticed after the fact is you would see American flags everywhere.
As much of a tragedy as that terrible day was, I know we all came together as a family. I know we all are stronger for it.
There's not really many words to describe it, just because of everything that was going on at the same time. And all we could think about is all of those poor people in New York and Pennsylvania and in the Pentagon. They lost their lives for no reason except for hate. And I'll never forget it. And I hope to never have a day like that ever again.
It was a very, very somber day, and when all of us at the LTPA office came together, it was very challenging that day for everyone to be able to conduct business, because all you could think about was what was happening in the world.
You know, I guess in life it's marked by events. All of us know probably where we were when a president was assassinated or a space shuttle exploded. I'll never forget that morning. I just carried my son to school and was on the way to work when the news broke on my car radio that an attack in New York City had occurred.
That's what my story was, day in and day out, as I watched those brave men work through the rubble so that families could have closure and peace to bury their own. Everyone's story is different, but this one is mine. Thank you.